So, the premiere of House of the Dragon leaked online yesterday, ahead of its official release. And between you and me, might have been Prince Daemon Targaryen, just in pure spite. Welcome Game of Thrones fans, and thank you for clicking on my spoiler review for House of the Dragon Episode 1. As the show is now officially streaming on HBO Max, we're going to be discussing spoilers for story, characters, and connections to the wider Game of Thrones universe, so make sure you watch the episode before this video, or check out my spoiler-free review on the first 3 episodes right up here, and start the conversation with your thoughts on this premiere in the comments below, because that's the most important part. As for me, I love to be back in Westeros. This episode immediately sucks you in with its immersive visuals and immaculate, lavish production and costume design. What really stood out to me from the beginning was, number one, how it's a very familiar, but also quite different Westeros in terms of how they see their leaders, how the houses are united under one rule. As the Targaryens, they're strict leaders, they're stern leaders, but they're revered, they're respected, they're even adored by some of their peers and subjects. The lords are all united and see Viserys as a beloved king of all the 7 kingdoms. But also this show has this much more intimate tone. The first scene introduces us to the main players, but also to the tension already brewing amidst the Targaryen family that the rest of the episode spends its entire runtime fuming, stoking the fires of that tension for the end, the bow to break, to snap, and we have our conflict. That first scene, narrated by an older version of the show's lead character, Rhaenyra Targaryen, introduces us as well to the main themes of the series of legacy, which we see how it weighed down on the shoulders of and haunted old King Jaehaerys Targaryen, and throughout this first episode, we see how it haunts and weighs down on the shoulders of King Viserys. But as Game of Thrones fans, we also know how it eventually weighs down and haunts Queen Daenerys Targaryen, so it's almost a Targaryen curse. But before I continue with my review on the premiere of House of the Dragon, I will be doing weekly reviews for every single episode of this series. So, if you're enjoying this review, if you love movies and TV, this is the place to be, so consider clicking that subscribe button and you won't miss any future House of the Dragon conversation or on your favorite movies and TV. And that only generates this story's other theme, which is survival and the desperate pursuit of it. It immediately makes for compelling storytelling where these characters drive this slow, methodically moving narrative forward. These dynamics become so compelling with the show's methodical pace throughout this premiere because we get to understand how a decision by one of the members of this family affects the other. We get to understand their worldview, we get to understand how they see each other, we get to understand how these relationships work, and so we get an immediate sense of stakes. We get a setup, we get a payoff. And so, in a seemingly effortless manner, we're emotionally invested in this story, where all these characters are painted in moral shades of gray. None of them are really evil, none of them are really good. They're all just trying to preserve their family name, to bring upon a prosperous future to their house. But decisions have repercussions. King Viserys, in the desperate pursuit for the survival of his bloodline to have an heir, makes a choice with all the best intentions and immediately is hit with tragedy. That is compelling storytelling. A choice that has a major consequence that affects all the characters that would naturally be emotionally invested in this story. And so you have the ruthless and proud Daemon Targaryen bragging about the king for one day, the greatest knight in all the kingdom, a man so proud of himself he has to cheat to win and finds himself humiliated when he cannot win even with his tactics. And we're brought to that confrontation between two brothers. After the loss of wife and child, and Viserys exiles his own brother out of King's Landing onto Dragonstone, and the bow has broken. The fracture in the dynasty is starting to show, but we get another choice. A choice that drastically changes the future of the Targaryen dynasty, and that's when Viserys, with the weight of his past decisions, of his ancestors' decisions on his shoulders, decides to name his daughter, Rhaenyra Targaryen, as his heir. We have this compelling relationship of a father who just wants a good future for his bloodline, for his family, and a daughter who wants to have the power to do the exact same thing. A daughter who wants to make her father proud. These are compelling dynamics. We have choices between these characters that, despite the best of intentions, they damage relationships. They damage the bigger, wider family around the Targaryens. Even when he's considering it with his council, you have all the different opinions because these people are emotionally invested. And you understand why when you have Lord Hightower, the Hand of the King, machinating his way with his daughter onto getting closer with the king, vying for the throne. You have Corlys Velaryon, someone who is naturally also very invested because he is a part of the family but has been cast out. He's not considered like a quote-unquote main Targaryen. That's compelling storytelling. All these dynamics, they are moving like pieces on a chessboard, and we get to slowly understand these characters, their worldview. It's a very well-crafted narrative, and it doesn't really happen without these characters making choices. It's the weight of those choices that brings about the consequences and establishes stakes. And this episode has several scenes to establish this tone, to establish the character dynamics. You have the fantastic jousting scene, which is just a great action sequence, but it's the moments of dialogue and character interactions in between. You have the moment where King Viserys' wife is giving birth, and he has to make this choice. You just see she gave birth, and Viserys just lies there next to his wife, filled with regret and sorrow and anguish. And it's an immensely captivating moment. All my favorite moments personally in this episode are all with Daemon Targaryen. We see him as the scorned brother of the king. We see him as a beloved, delicate uncle who truly cares for his niece and would support her as the heir. There's a selfishness to him, there's a pride to him, but there's also a tenderness to him. There's a lot of nuance in this character that I find fascinating. He is a ruthless leader of the Kingsguard. We see that village pillaging and massacre in King's Landing. We have that confrontation between the brothers in the Iron Throne where Matt Smith says so immediately this show has raised the bar for me because it's my favorite word. But perhaps the scene that best captures the consequences that have come from the choices made throughout this episode, how the dynamics of power have shifted throughout, as well as the themes present in the story, is the exchange between Viserys and Rhaenyra next to the head of Balerion, where they talk about how previous Targaryens have become weighed down. They were also haunted by this weight of legacy, by this desperate seeking of survival. I love this moment between father and daughter, not only because the performances are outstanding, but the writing in this show is just fantastic. The dialogue is sharp and it gives gravitas and weight to it all. Brings back all our favorite qualities from Game of Thrones, where this show isn't written like a fantasy show with dragons, it's written like a family drama, where a civil war is brewing between brothers, and that's just prime for emotional potential. And this show is planting all these seeds very carefully and very wisely. This is also the moment where we have my least favorite aspect of this episode, which is the shoehorned in reference to A Song of Ice and Fire. It gives some insight to why the Targaryens are so desperate, so paranoid with survival, because they must desperately grab onto the throne and never let it go. And while Viserys makes a good choice here in terms of the future of his bloodline to change the status quo of no woman shall sit on the throne, that's how the episode starts, with Rhaenys not being named the next heir, but now Rhaenyra is. But I just don't think that spelling out the vision of the Night King and the great cold and great darkness coming from the north will doom the world of men. We understand, but it doesn't raise any of the stakes in this show, in this story, or for any of these characters. It is such a small scale, intimate story that is powerful because of that, not in spite of that. I like the editing in this moment. I like how, as Viserys is telling this story, this dream of Aegon to Rhaenyra, we're intercutting with the lords swearing allegiance to her as the heir, and as soon as we say coming from the north with the great cold, we cut to Rickon Stark kneeling to Rhaenyra Targaryen. But by the end of the episode, the status quo has changed. The fracture that was present at the beginning of the episode has only widened, as now two brothers are apart vying for the throne, but then there's genuine love and care between family members. That's complex. That makes things complicated. It's not an easy solution, and it's emotionally devastating what this show can bring upon these characters if they continue down this path, and investing us in their decision making and how it affects one another. This is a fantastic premiere episode overall. I think there are some aspects of it that are too much on the nose. I think the slow, methodical pace is not going to be for everyone. I think a lot of people are going to have problems with how slow this show is moving, particularly in this first episode. And episode 2, let me tell you, is not that fast. But we'll get to it next week. For me, House of the Dragon really brings the fire and the blood in this premiere episode. I couldn't be happier to be back in Westeros, and I couldn't be happier to meet some new members of my favorite family. But that's just my review on House of the Dragon. I need your thoughts in the comments below. What is your favorite moment? Was there anything that shocked you? Are you hooked already onto the show? Let me know, and thank you so much for watching. I'll be back next week with more House of the Dragon reviews, and I hope to see you there. Big thanks to my channel members for always supporting the channel, and until the next one, love each other and love the movies.